The town of Mercy's Bend sat like a festering wound on the edge of the desert, where the red dust never settled and the wind carried more curses than prayers. In the summer of 1884, the sun beat down mercilessly on the weathered building, their wood bleached bone white from years of punishment. This was a place where honor was measured in bullets and morality wore spurs. Clara Whitmore stood before the cracked mirror in her childhood bedroom, staring at a stranger wrapped in white satin and lace. The wedding dress had been her mother's, altered to fit her slighter frame, though it hung on her like a shroud. Through the thin walls, she could hear her father, Sheriff Josiah Whitmore, speaking in low tones with Edgar Kane about dowries and land deeds, as if she were cattle being sold at market. Edgar Kane was 43 years her senior, a merchant who'd made his fortune selling supplies to the railroad companies. His hands were soft as a banker's, but his eyes held the coldness of a man who counted people the same way he counted coins. He'd buried 2 wives already, both younger than Clara's current 19 years. The town whispered about their deaths, but whispers didn't hold weight against wealth in Mercy's Bend. "It's for the family, Clara," her father had said when he'd announced the engagement. "The Whitmore name needs this alliance. You understand duty, don't you, girl? Duty." The word tasted like ash in her mouth. She understood duty the way a caged bird understood the bars, intimately, desperately, hopelessly. Her mother had understood duty too, had smiled through 20 years of marriage before the cholera took her. Clara had been 12 then, old enough to remember the relief that had flickered in her mother's eyes as she lay dying. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, unusual for this time of year. The air grew thick with the promise of rain, and Clara felt something wild stirring in her chest. She pressed her palms against the bodice of the dress, feeling her heart race beneath the prison of whalebone and propriety. The church bells began their solemn toll, calling the town to witness. Clara's Aunt Martha bustled into the room, her face pinched with the effort of appearing joyful. "Time to go, dear. Mustn't keep Mr. Kane waiting." They walked through the dusty streets toward the church, Clara's white dress already gathering a hem of red dirt. The townspeople lined the way, their faces a mixture of envy and pity. The young women looked at her dress, the older ones looked at her face. They knew. They all knew what this marriage meant. Inside the church, the air was stifling despite the approaching storm. Edgar Kane stood at the altar, his gray beard trimmed neat, his black suit expensive and ill-fitting on his corpulent frame. When he smiled at her approach, Clara saw possession in his eyes. Not love, not even desire, just ownership. Reverend Blackwood opened his prayer book, his voice droning like locusts in summer. Clara stood frozen, her bouquet of wildflowers wilting in her grip. Through the church windows, she saw the first flash of lightning illuminate the darkening sky. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." The words washed over her like water over stone. Her father stood in the front pew, his sheriff's badge gleaming with pride. This was his triumph, securing his daughter's future, elevating the family name. He didn't see the trembling in her hands or the tears she refused to let fall. Thunder rolled across the desert, so loud it shook the church windows. The Reverend paused, glancing nervously at the sky before continuing. "Do you, Edgar Kane, take this woman?" Clara's breath came short and sharp. The walls seemed to press closer. She could smell Edgar's pomade, sickly sweet and cloying. Could see the liver spots on his hands as he reached for hers. Could feel the future stretching before her like a noose. "And do you, Clara Whitmore?" Lightning cracked directly overhead. In that split second of brilliant illumination, Clara saw everything clearly. The trap closing around her, the years of slow suffocation ahead, the death of everything wild and free within her. "No," the word escaped before she could stop it. For a moment, the church fell silent except for the rain that had begun to lash against the windows. "Clara?" The Reverend's voice was uncertain. She dropped the bouquet, wildflowers scattering across the floor. "No," she said again, louder this time. Then she was running, her mother's dress trailing behind her like a ghost. "Clara!" Her father's voice boomed after her, but she was already pushing through the church doors into the storm. The rain hit her like a baptism, soaking through the white satin in seconds. She heard shouts behind her, saw lanterns bobbing in the darkness, but she didn't stop. Her wedding shoes slipped in the mud, so she kicked them off, running barefoot through the streets of Mercy's Bend as lightning illuminated her flight. She ran past the last of the town's buildings, past the cemetery where her mother lay, past all boundaries of propriety and safety. The desert opened before her, vast and terrible and free. Still she ran, the storm matching the tempest in her heart, miles from town, where the mesa rose against the sky like ancient bones. She finally stopped. Her dress was ruined, clinging to her body like a second skin. Her feet bled from rocks and thorns. Her hair had come loose from its careful pins, streaming wild around her face. This was the edge of nowhere, where decent folks didn't venture, where outlaws were said to hide in the canyons and wolves howled at the moon, where a woman alone was as good as dead. Clara didn't care. Death seemed preferable to the living death she'd fled. That's when she saw him. He emerged from the shadow of a massive boulder like he'd been born from the stone itself, tall and lean, wearing a long duster that had seen better decades, a hat pulled low over his eyes, which glinted in the intermittent lightning. His hand rested casual-like on the Colt at his hip, the metal showing rust and long use. They stood there in the rain, studying each other. Clara knew she should be afraid, a woman in a ruined wedding dress meeting a stranger in outlaw territory. But she was past fear now, in that wild place beyond propriety where only survival mattered. You running from something or to something? His voice was rough as sandpaper, carrying an accent that didn't belong to these parts. Does it matter? Clara lifted her chin, rain streaming down her face. A smile ghosted across his weathered features. Suppose not. Though that dress suggests the former. And you? She gestured at his worn appearance, the watchful way he held himself. You don't look like you're out here admiring the scenery. Name's Jesse Colt. He touched the brim of his hat in a mockery of politeness. And you're right, I'm not here for the view. Clara knew that name. Everyone in 3 territories knew that name. Jesse Colt, former member of the Garrison Gang, wanted in 5 states for robbery and worse, the kind of man her father had spent his career hunting. You know who I am, he observed, reading her recognition. Yes, and you're not running. I'm done running. Clara met his gaze steadily. I need to get away from here, far away, tonight. Jesse studied her for a long moment. The rain had begun to ease, but the air still crackled with electricity. That's a dangerous request. Miss, you don't know where I'm headed or why. I don't care. The words came out fierce and true. Whatever's ahead can't be worse than what's behind. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. You got any idea what you're asking? Life on the run ain't no church social, especially not with me. I'm not asking for your protection. Clara stepped forward, her ruined dress dragging in the mud. Just passage. I can take care of myself. Jessie laughed, short and sharp. Can you now? A society girl who can't even keep her shoes on? Anger flared in Clara's chest, hot and welcome after the numbness. This society girl just walked away from everything she's ever known. Don't mistake desperation for weakness. Mr. Colt. He considered her for another long moment, then nodded toward the canyon behind him. I've got a horse hidden back there. We'd need to move fast and quiet. There's people looking for me who wouldn't think twice about killing anyone in my company. There's people looking for me too, Clara said. They just plan to kill me slower. That earned her another of those ghost smiles. Well then, Miss, just Clara. She wouldn't give him her father's name. That part of her life was dead now. Well then, just Clara. Jesse turned toward the canyon, then looked back over his shoulder. You coming or not? Clara took one last look back toward Mercy's Bend, somewhere in that cluster of lights. Her father was probably organizing search parties. Edgar Kane was probably calculating how much this embarrassment would cost him. The good people of the town were probably scandalized. delighted to have something to gossip about for years to come. Let them talk. She was done being their cautionary tale. Clara gathered her ruined skirts and followed Jessie Colt into the darkness, toward whatever salvation or damnation awaited. The storm moved on across the desert, leaving stars in its wake. Behind them, her old life fell away like a shed skin. She was no longer Sheriff Whitmore's dutiful daughter, no longer Edgar Kane's purchased bride. She was just Clara now, running through the night with an outlaw, her white dress stained red with desert dirt and her own blood. For the first time in her 19 years, she felt alive. The abandoned warehouse sat tucked into a narrow canyon, half hidden by scraggly mesquite and fallen rocks. Jessie had led them through twisting paths in the darkness, his horse picking its way sure-footed while Clara clung to his back, her ruined dress tangled around her legs. Now, as dawn painted the sky purple and gold, she could finally see their refuge. It wasn't much, 4 walls of weathered wood, a roof that had seen better days, and gaps between the boards where the wind whistled through, but it was shelter, and it was far from Mercy's Bend. Used to be a way station for the mining companies, Jessie explained, sliding off his horse and reaching up to help her down. His hands were careful around her waist, touching her only as long as necessary. Nobody's used it in years. Clara's legs nearly buckled when her feet touched ground. She'd never ridden so far or so hard, and every muscle screamed in protest. Jessie steadied her with one hand, his touch impersonal as a doctor's. "There's a spring out back," he said, already moving to unsaddle his horse. "Get yourself cleaned up. You look like you've been dragged through hell backwards." She wanted to snap at him, but caught sight of herself in a broken piece of mirror propped against the wall. Her wedding dress was no longer white, but a muddy brown, torn in several places. Her hair hung in wet tangles around her face and her feet. She didn't want to look at her feet. The spring was little more than a trickle of water emerging from the rocks, but it was clear and cold. Clara knelt beside it, cupping water in her hands to wash the dirt and blood from her face. She tried to clean her feet, wincing at the numerous cuts and scratches. "Here!" Jessie's voice startled her. He set down a worn saddlebag beside her. "Might be something in there that fits. Can't have you wandering around in that." He gestured at her destroyed dress. Clara opened the bag to find men's clothes, a faded blue shirt, brown trousers, a leather vest. They smelled of horse and gunpowder, but they were clean and dry. "These are yours?" "Were." Jessie had moved back to the warehouse entrance, giving her privacy. Previous owner won't be needing them anymore. The casual implication sent a chill through her, but Clara pushed it aside. She was traveling with an outlaw. She couldn't afford squeamishness now. She changed quickly, grateful to be free of the sodden wedding dress. The clothes hung loose on her frame, but they were infinitely more practical. When she returned to the warehouse, Jessie had started a small fire in a circle of stones. He glanced up at her transformation, and something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or approval. "You clean up different than expected," he said, returning his attention to the fire. Clara settled across from him, tucking her legs beneath her. In the growing light, she could see him more clearly. His face was weathered but younger than she'd first thought, maybe 30 years to her 19. A scar ran along his left jaw, white against sun-darkened skin. His hands, as he fed sticks to the fire, were steady and competent. "Why did you help me?" she asked. Jessie shrugged. "Maybe I've got a weakness for runaways and wedding dresses. I'm serious." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You had the look." "What look?" "The look of someone who'd rather die than go back." His eyes met hers across the fire. "I know that look." They sat in silence as the sun climbed higher. Outside, she could hear birds beginning their morning songs. It seemed impossible that just hours ago she'd been standing in a church, about to pledge herself to Edgar Kane. "They'll come looking," Clara said eventually. "Your people?" "My father's the sheriff. He won't let this go." Jessie's eyebrows rose slightly. "Sheriff Whitmore's daughter?" Well, that explains the fancy dress. He shook his head. You sure know how to complicate a man's life. Miss Clara, I told you, I'm not asking for protection, just time, distance. Once we're far enough away, we can part ways. Can we now? Jessie pulled out a knife and began whittling a piece of wood. And where exactly do you plan to go? A woman alone, no money, no connections, wearing stolen clothes? Clara hadn't thought that far ahead. The only goal had been escape. I'll figure something out. Sure you will. His tone was dry as dust. Maybe you'll become a schoolmarm, or a seamstress. I'm sure nobody will ask questions about where you came from or why you're alone. What do you want me to say? Clara's temper flared. That I'm a fool? That I didn't think it through? Fine, I'm a fool. But I'm a free fool, which is more than I was yesterday. Jessie studied her, his knife pausing mid-stroke. You always this fiery, or is it just the circumstances? I don't know. The admission surprised her. I've never had the chance to find out. That earned her an actual smile, brief but genuine. Well, Miss Clara, looks like you're about to get your education. Over the next few days, Clara discovered exactly what Jessie meant. Life in the wilderness was nothing like the comfortable existence she'd known. Everything was a challenge, from starting a fire to finding food to simply staying clean. Jessie taught her with a patience she hadn't expected. How to build a fire that wouldn't smoke and give away their position. How to set snares for rabbits. How to read the sky for weather changes. How to move quietly through the brush. You're not completely hopeless, he admitted on the third day, watching her successfully gut and clean a rabbit she'd snared. High praise indeed, Clara replied, but she felt a flush of pride. At night, they slept on opposite sides of the warehouse, the fire between them like a chaperone. Clara would lie awake listening to the sounds of the desert, coyotes howling, owls hunting, the wind singing through the canyon walls. Sometimes she thought Jessie was awake too, but neither of them spoke in the darkness. It was on the fifth night that things shifted. Jessie had gone hunting and come back with a gash on his arm from a fall. He dismissed it as nothing, but Clara could see the blood soaking through his shirt. Let me see, she demanded. It's fine. Jessie Colt, you've been bossing me around for days. Now it's my turn. Let me see that arm. He gave her a look she couldn't quite read, then slowly rolled up his sleeve. The cut was deeper than he'd let on, jagged and still bleeding. Clara fetched water from the spring and tore strips from her abandoned wedding dress. Jessie sat still as stone while she cleaned the wound, though she saw his jaw tighten when she dabbed at the deepest parts. You've done this before. He observed. My mother was often clumsy. Clara kept her eyes on her work. I learned to tend injuries. Jessie was quiet for a moment. Then, your father. No. Clara tied off the bandage. She was just unhappy. Sometimes unhappy people hurt themselves without meaning to, and sometimes they hurt others. Clara looked up to find Jessie watching her with an expression she hadn't seen before. Understanding. Maybe, or recognition. Is that why you left? She asked. Someone hurt you? Someone betrayed me. His voice was flat. My partner. We'd ridden together 5 years. I trusted him like a brother. Then one day I woke up to find he'd taken our score and left me to hang for a murder I didn't commit. But you've committed others. Yes. No hesitation. Though not as many as they say. Stories grow in the telling, and dead men make convenient scapegoats. Clara finished with the bandage but didn't move away. This close. She could smell the leather and horse on him, could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. Do you regret it? The life you've chosen? Chosen? Jessie laughed, short and bitter. Miss Clara, nobody chooses this life. They fall into it, one bad decision at a time, until there's no way back. There's always a way back. You really believe that? I have to. Clara's voice was barely a whisper. Otherwise, what am I doing out here? Jessie reached up with his good hand, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The touch was gentle as butterfly wings. Maybe you're learning who you really are. The air between them crackled with possibility. Clara found herself leaning forward, drawn by something stronger than propriety or sense. Jesse's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. Then a coyote howled outside, breaking the spell. Jesse dropped his hand and stood abruptly, putting distance between them. "Get some sleep," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "We need to move tomorrow. This place won't be safe much longer." Clara watched him retreat to his side of the warehouse, her skin still tingling where he touched her. She wrapped herself in her blanket, but sleep was a long time coming. The next night, a storm rolled in. Not like the one that had covered her escape, but a cold, steady rain that found every gap in the warehouse roof. They huddled closer to the fire, trying to stay warm and dry. "Tell me about your life," Clara said, "before you became this." Jesse was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "I was a rancher's son in Texas. Had a little spread near the Brazos River, nothing fancy, but it was mine. What happened? Drought, then cattle fever, then the bank." He stared into the fire. "They gave me 6 months to pay what I owed. Might as well have been 6 years. I took to robbing to save my land, but," he shrugged, "once you cross that line, there's no crossing back. I'm sorry. Don't be. We all make our choices." He looked at her then. Even sheriff's daughters in wedding dresses. The rain drummed harder on the roof. Water dripped through in several places, and Clara shivered despite the fire. "Come here," Jesse said quietly. Clara hesitated. "I'm not going to ravish you, Miss Clara, but you're no good to anybody if you freeze to death." She moved around the fire to sit beside him. He wrapped his blanket around both of them, careful to keep space between their bodies. But the warmth was immediate and welcome. "Better?" "Yes." Clara could feel the heat of him through their clothes, could hear his breathing in the darkness. "Jesse? Thank you for everything." He was quiet for a moment. Then she felt his arm come around her shoulders, holding her gently against his side. "Get some rest, Clara. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." She closed her eyes, listening to his heartbeat and the rain. For the first time since fleeing the church, she felt something like peace. When she woke, the first thing she noticed was warmth. The second was that she and Jesse had shifted in the night. She was curled against his chest, his arms around her, their bodies fitted together like puzzle pieces. For a moment, she didn't move, didn't even breathe. She could feel his chest rising and falling, could see the morning light playing across his face. Asleep. He looked younger. The hard line softened. Then his eyes opened, and they stared at each other in the pale dawn light. Neither moved. The air between them grew thick with unspoken words. Finally. Jesse pulled away, careful and deliberate. "Storm's past," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "We should get moving." Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. They broke camp in silence, the memory of their closeness hanging between them like a physical thing. But as they prepared to leave the warehouse that had been their sanctuary, Clara knew something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer just a runaway bride fleeing an unwanted marriage, and Jesse was no longer just the outlaw who'd helped her escape. They were something else now, something unnamed and dangerous as the desert itself. The sound of horses echoing through the canyon sent Jesse into immediate action. He grabbed Clara's wrist, pulling her behind a cluster of boulders as he drew his colt in one smooth motion. They crouched in the shadows, hardly breathing, as the hoofbeats grew closer. "Bounty hunters," Jesse whispered, his lips close to her ear. 3, maybe 4. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. They'd been traveling for 2 days since leaving the warehouse, and she'd begun to think they might actually escape. Now, reality crashed back like a flash flood. The riders passed within 50 feet of their hiding spot, dust swirling in their wake. Clara caught a glimpse of hard faces and harder eyes, the kind of men who'd track a person to hell for the right price. They waited until the sound faded completely before Jesse finally relaxed his grip on his gun. "We can't stay here. They'll double back when they don't find our trail ahead." They rode hard through the night, Jesse pushing his horse to its limits while Clara clung to him, her face pressed against his back to shield from the whipping branches. When dawn finally broke, they found themselves at the edge of a small valley where a modest ranch house sat surrounded by corrals and outbuildings. "Wait here," Jesse commanded. But an elderly woman had already emerged from the house, a shotgun cradled in her arms like she'd been born with it. "Jesse Colt," the woman said, her voice dry as tumbleweeds. "Been a while since you darkened my doorstep." "Mabel." Jesse touched his hat brim. "We need help." The woman, Mabel, shifted her sharp gaze to Clara. Her eyes lingered on the men's clothes, the exhaustion written across Clara's face, the way she sat the horse like someone still learning. "Get inside," Mabel said finally. "Both of you, quickly now." The ranch house was simple but clean, smelling of coffee and bacon grease. Mabel set about making breakfast while Jesse tended to his horse. Clara found herself alone with the older woman, who studied her with knowing eyes. "You're not his usual type," Mabel observed, cracking eggs into a skillet. "I'm not his anything," Clara replied, though the words felt false even as she spoke them. Mabel snorted. "Girl, I've got eyes. Also got this." She picked up Clara's wadded wedding dress from where it had fallen out of the saddlebag. A delicate handkerchief tumbled out, embroidered with the initials C.W. "Clara Whitmore," Mabel read. "Sheriff Whitmore's girl. Lord have mercy." Clara's stomach dropped. "Please, Hush now. I'm not turning you in." Mabel set a plate in front of her. "But you need to understand what you've gotten yourself into. Your father's got half the territory looking for you. And that man you were supposed to marry, Edgar Kane, he's put up a reward that's got every bounty hunter west of the Mississippi licking their chops. A reward for my return? A reward for you. Period. Dead or alive, though he'd prefer alive." Mabel's expression was grim. "Man like Kane doesn't take kindly to being humiliated. He'll want to make an example of you." Jesse entered then, and Mabel repeated the news. His face darkened with each word. "How much?" he asked. $5,000. Jesse whistled low. "That's more than what's on my head." "Which is saying something," Mabel replied. She looked between them. "You two need to get out of the territory. Maybe head to California, or down to Mexico." "I won't run to Mexico," Jesse said flatly. "Then you're a fool." Mabel's voice was sharp. "Pride's a luxury you can't afford right now." That night, Mabel gave them her barn to sleep in, saying it was safer than the house if anyone came looking. Clara lay in the hay, staring up at the rafters, trying to process everything she'd learned. $5,000, she said into the darkness. That's enough to set someone up for life. Having second thoughts, Jesse's voice came from a few feet away. "No, just understanding the weight of what I've done." She turned toward his voice. "Jesse, you should leave me here. Take your horse and go. This isn't your fight." She heard him shift in the hay. "Maybe not, but I've made it mine." "Why?" Silence stretched between them. Then, "When I saw you that night, standing in the rain in that ruined dress, you looked like everything I'd lost, everything they'd taken from me. And I thought, maybe if I helped you get free, it would mean something. Maybe it would balance the scales a little." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm not your redemption, Jesse." "I know that." His voice was soft. "But maybe you're my reminder that there's still something worth saving in this world." The next morning, Mabel woke them before dawn. "Riders coming," she said tersely. "Get to the root cellar. Now!" They scrambled down into the darkness, pulling the door shut just as horses thundered into the yard. Clara pressed against Jesse in the small space, barely breathing as boots stomped overhead. "We're looking for a woman," a rough voice said. "Young, dark hair. Might be dressed as a boy." "Haven't seen anybody like that," Mabel replied, steady as granite. "Just me and my chickens out here. Mind if we look around? Mind if I shoot you for trespassing?" There was nervous laughter. Then the sound of retreating footsteps. They waited another hour before Mabel let them out. "They'll be back," she said. with more men and less patience. You need to go." As they prepared to leave, Mabel pulled Clara aside. "That man's no saint," she said quietly. "He's done bad things. Some may be unforgivable. But I've known Jesse Colt since he was barely older than you. And there's good in him still. Question is, are you strong enough to stand by him when the world wants him dead?" "I don't know," Clara admitted. "Honest answer." Mabel pressed a small bag into her hands. "Food and ammunition, and this." She held out a man's wedding ring. "Plain gold, worn smooth. Was my husband's. Might come in handy if you need to pretend to be married. People ask fewer questions of a married couple." They rode out as the sun set, taking back trails Mabel had suggested. Jesse was quiet, his usual vigilance sharpened to a knife's edge. They made camp in a grove of cottonwoods beside a stream, far from any trail. "We need to talk about California," Jesse said as they sat by their small fire. "I thought you didn't want to run." "So, want and need are different things." He poked at the fire with a stick. "Mabel's right. We can't stay ahead of them forever. Either we get out of the territory or you turn me in for the reward." Jesse's head snapped up, his eyes flashing with anger. "Don't ever say that again. It would solve your problems. $5,000 could buy you a new life somewhere." He was on his feet in an instant, pacing like a caged wolf. "Is that what you think of me? That I'd sell you like cattle? I think you're a practical man in an impossible situation." Jesse stopped pacing, his back to her. "My partner, the one who betrayed me. His name was Samuel Martinez. We'd pulled a job, nothing big, just enough to keep us going. But there was a witness, a woman. Samuel wanted to kill her, said it was the practical thing. I refused." He turned to face her. "He left me to hang because I wouldn't be practical about killing an innocent woman. So don't tell me what kind of man I am. Clara, I know exactly what kind of man I am." The fire crackled between them. Clara stood slowly, crossing to where he stood rigid with old pain and fresh anger. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean—" "I know what you meant." His voice was rough. "And you're not wrong. Any practical man would take that reward. But I stopped being practical the night I helped a runaway bride in a thunderstorm." Clara reached up, touching his face gently. He closed his eyes at the contact, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "Jesse," she whispered. He opened his eyes, and what she saw there made her breath catch. Hunger, yes, but also fear. Not of the bounty hunters or the law, but of this thing building between them. "Clara, we can't—" She rose on her toes and kissed him. For a moment, he stood frozen. Then his arms came around her, crushing her against him as he kissed her back with desperate intensity. His hands tangled in her hair, and she could taste coffee and desperation on his lips. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "This is madness," Jesse said, but he didn't let her go. "Everything about this is madness," Clara replied, "but it's our madness." He kissed her again, gentler this time, with a tenderness that made her ache. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. "I won't let them take you," he promised. "Not Kane, not your father, not anyone. And I won't let you face this alone." Clara replied, "Partners? Partners." They settled by the fire, closer now than before. Jesse pulled out a bottle of whiskey from his saddlebag, taking a long pull before passing it to Clara. She coughed at the burn, but took another sip anyway. "Tell me about justice," Clara said, watching the fire dance. "Do you believe in it?" Jesse considered. "I believe in balance. Everything costs something. Every choice has a consequence. Justice is just a word people use when the balance tips their way. And redemption's harder. Can't be given, only earned. And the price—" He took another drink. "The price is usually everything you have. What about forgiveness? That's the hardest of all, because first you have to forgive yourself. And some things—" He trailed off. Clara took the bottle from him. "My mother used to say that God forgives all sins if you truly repent. Your mother sounds like she was a good woman. She was a broken woman trying to be good." Clara took another sip, the whiskey making her bold. I think maybe we're all broken, just trying to find the pieces that fit together. Jessie looked at her then with such intensity it made her shiver. What if the pieces don't fit? What if they're too sharp, too damaged? Then we make new pieces. She moved closer, drawn by his warmth and his sadness. We reshape ourselves into something different. The fire had burned low. In the darkness beyond their small circle of light, coyotes called to each other. Jessie pulled Clara against him, and she rested her head on his shoulder. I'm frightened, she admitted quietly. Of what? Of wanting this, of wanting you, of how much I'm willing to sacrifice to keep this freedom. Jessie pressed his lips to her hair. Fear's not always bad. Keeps you sharp, keeps you alive. Is that how you've survived so long? That and luck, but luck runs out. Clara, always does. She turned in his arms, looking up at him. Then we make the most of it while we have it. The hunger in his eyes flared bright. He cupped her face in his hands, studying her like he was trying to memorize every detail. You sure about this? He asked. Because if we cross this line, there's no going back. You'll be marked as surely as I am. An outlaw's woman. That's not a stain that washes clean. I was marked the moment I ran from that church. Clara said, At least this mark is one I choose. Jessie made a sound low in his throat, somewhere between a growl and a prayer. Then he was kissing her again, and Clara felt herself falling into the flame they'd been dancing around since that first night. They made their bed beneath the stars, horse blankets spread over soft grass. Jessie's hands were gentle but sure as they unlaced her vest, as they traced the curves hidden beneath men's clothing. Clara had never known such hunger, such need. Every touch was a revelation, every kiss a promise. When they came together, it was with the desperation of the condemned and the joy of the newly freed. Clara bit her lip to keep from crying out, aware even in passion of the danger surrounding them. Jessie whispered her name like a prayer, like an anchor in the storm. Afterwards, they lay entwined, sweat cooling on their skin. Clara traced the scars on Jessie's chest, each one a story of survival. No regrets, he asked. None. She pressed a kiss to a particularly wicked scar over his ribs. You? Only that I can't give you more than this. You deserve better than a life on the run. I deserve the life I choose, Clara corrected. And I choose this. I choose you. Jessie pulled her closer, and they drifted into sleep as the stars wheeled overhead. For one perfect night, they were just two people finding solace in each other, far from the world that would tear them apart. But morning always comes, and with it, the reminder that chosen or not, some roads only lead to sorrow. Clara woke to find the space beside her empty and cold. Panic seized her heart until she spotted Jessie standing at the edge of their camp, his silhouette dark against the pale dawn sky. Everything about his posture screamed of a decision made. You're leaving, she said. Not a question, but a statement of fact. He didn't turn. It's for the best. Clara rose, wrapping the blanket around herself, and walked to stand beside him. The morning air was sharp with the promise of autumn. Best for whom? For you. His voice was flat, emotionless. Last night was, I shouldn't have let it happen. Let it happen? Anger flared in Clara's chest. As I recall, we both made that choice. I made a mistake. He still wouldn't look at her. You're young, scared, grateful for my help. I took advantage. The slap cracked across his face before Clara even realized she'd moved. Jessie's head snapped to the side, and finally, he looked at her. Don't you dare, she said, her voice low and dangerous. Don't you dare reduce what happened between us to some moment of weakness. I knew exactly what I was doing. Jessie touched his reddened cheek, something almost like a smile ghosting across his features. That's quite a right hand you've got there. Answer me this, Clara demanded. Are you leaving because you truly believe it's best for me, or because you're scared? Maybe both. Then you're a coward." The words hung between them like a challenge. "The Jesse cult I've come to know doesn't run from hard choices. The Jesse cult you know is a fantasy." His voice turned harsh. "I'm a killer. Clara, a thief. A man with more blood on his hands than years left to live. What kind of life can I offer you?" "The only one I want," Clara replied. "Freedom. Choice. The chance to be myself instead of someone's properly trained daughter or purchased bride." Jesse studied her for a long moment, then sighed, the fight seeming to drain out of him. "You're going to be the death of me. Woman. Better me than a rope or a bullet." That earned her a real smile, brief but genuine. Can't argue with that logic. They broke camp in silence, but it was a different silence than before, charged with possibility rather than denial. As Clara swung up behind Jesse on his horse, she felt the decision settle between them like a covenant. They'd ridden for perhaps an hour when Jesse suddenly tensed. "Someone's following us." Clara didn't question how he knew. She'd learned to trust his instincts. They veered off the trail, pushing through thick brush until they found a defensible position among some rocks. The riders appeared minutes later, 6 men, all armed, led by a face Clara recognized with a chill. "That's Marcus Kane," she whispered. "Edgar's son." Jesse's hand tightened on his gun. "Looks like Daddy sent the boy to fetch you." Marcus Kane was everything his father wasn't: young, lean, and vicious as a rattlesnake. He'd made his reputation breaking strikes for the mining companies, the kind of work that required a taste for violence. "They stopped here," one of the men said, studying the ground where Clara and Jesse had left the trail. "Then they can't be far." Marcus's voice carried clearly. "Remember, I want the woman alive. Colt's worth the same dead or breathing, so make it easy on yourselves." They waited, barely breathing. As the men searched, Clara could feel Jesse coiled beside her, ready to fight. 6 against 1. Those weren't odds even Jesse Colt could beat. Then, salvation came from an unexpected source. Gunfire erupted from the opposite ridge, sending Marcus's men scrambling for cover. Clara caught a glimpse of the attackers, Apache raiders, taking advantage of the exposed riders. "Move," Jesse hissed, pulling Clara deeper into the rocks as the firefight intensified. They slipped away in the chaos, Jesse leading them through passages Clara wouldn't have seen on her own. Behind them, the gunfire continued, punctuated by screams. They didn't stop until well after nightfall, finally taking shelter in a box canyon Jesse seemed to know. Only then did Clara realize she was shaking. "Those men," she said. "Do you think—" "Some probably died." Jesse's voice was matter-of-fact. "That's the way of things out here. They chose to hunt us. They accepted the risk." "And the Apache? We're probably tracking them same as us. White men traveling in a group, well-armed, likely carrying supplies." He shrugged. "The Apache have their own justice to seek." Clara pondered this as Jesse built a small, smokeless fire. The world she'd entered was governed by different rules than the one she'd left behind. Death came quick and often. Justice was personal, and survival trumped morality. "Does it get easier?" she asked. "Watching people die?" Jesse looked at her across the fire. "If it does, that's when you know you've lost the last piece of your soul worth saving." They were 3 days into the mountains when Jesse finally relaxed enough to stop looking over his shoulder every few minutes. He'd been pushing hard, and it showed in the deep lines around his eyes, the way his hands shook slightly when he thought Clara wasn't watching. "You need rest," Clara told him as they made camp beside a mountain stream. "I need to keep you safe." "You can't do that if you collapse from exhaustion." She pulled him down beside her. "Sleep. I'll keep watch. You don't know what to watch for." "I know enough." Clara checked the Colt .45 Jesse had given her, the weight of it still foreign in her hands. "Trust me." It was a measure of his exhaustion that Jesse actually lay down, his head in Clara's lap, within minutes. His breathing deepened into sleep. Clara sat in the gathering darkness, one hand on the gun, the other gently stroking Jesse's hair. He looked younger in sleep. The harsh lines softened. She could see the man he might have been if life had dealt him different cards. He woke with a start several hours later, hand going immediately to his weapon before recognizing where he was. Easy, Clara soothed. Nothing stirred but the owls. Jesse sat up, scrubbing a hand over his face. I was dreaming. About the past, Samuel, the day everything went wrong. He stared into the darkness. We'd robbed a stage, nothing special. But there was a woman on it, traveling alone, young, pretty. Samuel wanted... He trailed off. You don't have to tell me. No, you should know. You should know exactly who you're throwing your lot in with. Jesse's voice was hard. Samuel wanted to have his fun with her. I said no. We argued. He pulled on me, and I shot him. Not fatal, just enough to stop him. The woman ran, Samuel ran, and I was left holding the bag when the law showed up. You saved her, and doomed myself. He laughed bitterly. Samuel recovered, spun a tale about how I'd gone mad, killed the stage drivers in cold blood. He had the woman's jewelry to prove his version. Last I heard, he was living respectable in San Francisco. Clara took his hand, feeling the calluses and scars. You did the right thing. The right thing cost me everything. Not everything. She squeezed his fingers. It led you to that storm. To me. Jesse turned to look at her then, and something shifted in his expression. Clara, there's something I need to tell you. The crack of a rifle split the night. Jesse threw Clara flat as bullets sparked off the rocks where they'd been sitting. Surrounding the camp, someone shouted. Come out with your hands high. Jesse pulled Clara behind a boulder, his mind already calculating angles and odds. When I start shooting, you run, follow the stream down? No. Clara, I said no. She checked her gun, heart pounding but hands steady. Partners, remember? More shots rang out. Closer now. Jesse returned fire, his shots precise and economical. Clara saw a shadow moving to their left and fired, the Colt bucking in her hands. The shadow dropped with a cry. Nice shot, Jesse said, but his approval was tinged with something like regret. The firefight was brief but vicious. When the smoke cleared, 4 men lay dead or dying, and Jesse had a graze along his ribs that bled freely. We need to move, he said through gritted teeth. There'll be more coming. They fled through the darkness. Clara supporting Jesse when he stumbled. The wound wasn't deep, but blood loss and exhaustion were taking their toll. As dawn broke, they found themselves at the entrance to an abandoned mine shaft. Jesse was pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Just need a minute, he said. Then his knees buckled. Clara caught him, lowering him gently to the ground. The graze was worse than he'd let on, the bullet having carved a deep furrow along his ribs. Stubborn man, she muttered, tearing strips from her shirt to bind the wound. Jesse caught her hand. Clara, listen. If something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. Listen. His grip tightened. There's a place in Colorado, town called Sanctuary. Man named Father Miguel runs a mission there. He helps people like us. If something happens, you go there. Promise me. Jesse, promise me. I promise, Clara said, tears stinging her eyes. But you're going to be fine. You have to be fine. Jesse's hand came up to cup her cheek. My fierce Clara, when did you become so brave? The night I met you, she whispered. He smiled. Then his eyes rolled back and he went limp. No, no, no. Clara pressed her ear to his chest, nearly sobbing with relief when she heard his heartbeat, weak but steady. She dragged him into the mine shaft, out of sight from any pursuers. Using skills he'd taught her, she built a small fire, boiled water from their canteens, and properly cleaned his wound. Jesse drifted in and out of consciousness, burning with fever. He called out names, Samuel, his mother, and Clara. Always Clara. She held him through the chills, cooled him through the heat, and prayed to a God she wasn't sure still listened to runaway daughters and the outlaws they loved. On the 3rd day, Jesse's fever broke. He woke to find Clara asleep beside him, her hand still clutching his. The mine shaft was dim, but he could see the exhaustion written across her face, the way her clothes hung loose from days of privation. "Clara," he whispered. Her eyes snapped open, immediately filling with tears when she saw him lucid. "You're awake. You're really awake." "How long?" "3 days. I thought—" She couldn't finish. Jessie reached up weakly, brushing tears from her cheeks. "Takes more than a scratch to kill Jessie Colt." "A scratch?" Clara's laugh was half sob. "You nearly died, you impossible man, but I didn't." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "Thanks to you." Clara caught his hand, pressing it to her cheek. "I was so frightened. Not of dying, but of losing you, of being alone again." "You'll never be alone," Jessie promised. "Not while I draw breath." She kissed him then, gentle and desperate all at once. When they parted, Jessie saw something in her eyes that took his breath away. Not just love, but partnership, trust, the kind of bond forged in fire and sealed in blood. "I killed a man," Clara said quietly. "During the fight, I shot him, and I don't feel guilty. What does that make me?" "A survivor." Jessie answered, "Nothing more, nothing less." "Is that what we are now? Survivors?" "We're whatever we choose to be." He struggled to sit up, Clara supporting him. "But right now, we need to choose to be gone. They'll find this place eventually." Clara helped him to his feet, taking most of his weight. "Can you ride?" "Can try." They emerged from the mine to find Jessie's horse still waiting, trained to stay ground-tied no matter what. Clara helped Jessie mount, then swung up behind him, taking the reins. "Where to?" she asked. Jessie leaned back against her, trusting her completely. "Away from here. Find us somewhere safe to hole up. I'll heal faster with proper rest and food." Clara urged the horse forward, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Jessie had saved her, protected her, nearly died for her. Now it was her turn. As they rode into the afternoon sun, Clara realized she'd crossed more than just physical distance since that night in the church. She'd crossed from one life to another, from oneself to another. She was no longer Sheriff Whitmore's daughter, no longer Edgar Kane's runaway bride. She was Clara, Outlaw's woman, survivor, killer when necessary. She was free, and freedom, she was learning, came with a price measured in blood and choices that couldn't be undone. But as she felt Jessie's weight against her, heard his steady breathing, she knew she'd pay that price again. Some things were worth any cost. The hunting cabin sat deep in a pine grove, so well hidden that Clara nearly missed it despite Jessie's mumbled directions. It belonged to an old trapper Jessie had known years ago, long since dead. But the structure remained sound. Clara half-carried, half-dragged Jessie inside, settling him on the narrow cot before collapsing beside him. Jessie's fever returned with nightfall, worse than before. He thrashed and muttered, lost in dreams or memories Clara couldn't follow. She bathed his burning skin with cool water, forced willow bark tea between his lips, and whispered prayers her mother had taught her long ago. "Should have been faster," Jessie muttered, eyes glassy and unfocused. "Should have saved them all." "Shh," Clara soothed, though she wondered who haunted his fever dreams. "Martha, no, I'm sorry, so sorry." Clara's hands stilled. Martha, a name he'd never mentioned. Another ghost from his past, another weight he carried. On the second night, Jessie's fever spiked dangerously high. He seized Clara's hand with surprising strength, his eyes suddenly clear and desperate. "If I die, you're not dying. Listen." His grip was painful. "Samuel Martinez, San Francisco. He has letters, proof. Could clear my name of the worst charges. Jessie, save your strength. Promise me you'll live. Promise me you won't throw your life away on revenge or regret." "I promise," Clara said, tears streaming down her face. "But you have to promise to fight. Don't leave me alone out here." Jessie's hand relaxed, his eyes drifting closed. "Not alone, never alone. You're stronger than you know." The fever broke near dawn on the third day. Clara woke from an exhausted doze to find Jessie watching her with clear eyes. his hand gently stroking her hair. "You stayed," he said, voice rough but lucid. "Where else would I go?" Clara tried for lightness, but her voice cracked. "You're stuck with me now. Jesse Colt, there are worse fates." He struggled to sit up, wincing at the pull of his wound. "How long this time?" 3 days. Again. Clara helped him upright, noting how his ribs stood out sharp beneath his skin. "You need food, real food, not just fever broth." Over the following days, Jesse grew stronger. Clara hunted rabbits with the snares he'd taught her to set, found edible plants in the forest, even managed to shoot a small deer that wandered too close to the cabin. She was surprised by her own competence, by how naturally the survival skills came to her now. "You're different," Jesse observed one evening, watching her clean the deer rifle with practiced efficiency. "Different how?" "Harder, more sure of yourself." He paused. "It suits you." Clara set down the rifle, meeting his eyes. "I've had a good teacher, maybe too good." There was regret in his voice. "I've turned you into someone who can survive." Clara interrupted. "Into someone who makes her own choices. Don't you dare apologize for that." Jesse smiled, that rare, genuine expression that transformed his face. "Yes, ma'am." As his strength returned, Jesse began teaching Clara more than just survival. He showed her how to quick draw, how to fan the hammer for rapid shots, how to reload under pressure. Her hands, once soft from a life of genteel leisure, grew calloused and sure. "You're a natural," Jesse said after she put 6 shots in a target barely bigger than a playing card. "Better than some men I've ridden with. I had good motivation to learn." Clara blew smoke from the barrel, a gesture she'd seen him make. "Besides, I've discovered I like the weight of a gun. Makes me feel capable. Power's seductive." Jesse warned. "Don't let it seduce you into stupidity." "Like it seduced you?" Jesse's face darkened. "Yes, exactly like that." One night, as they sat by the fire, Clara finally asked about Martha. Jesse was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My sister. She was 16 when the bank took our ranch. I told her I'd fix everything. Told her to wait for me in town while I—" He stared into the flames. "First robbery went bad. By the time I got back, she'd taken work at a saloon. You can imagine what kind. She said it was just serving drinks. But I knew. Everyone knew." Clara moved closer, not speaking, just offering her presence. "She got sick, the kind of sick that comes from that life. I had money by then, stolen money, but no doctor would come. Not for a saloon girl. She died alone while I was off playing Outlaw." His voice was flat, emotionless. "I wasn't even there. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't it?" Jesse turned to look at her. "Every choice has a consequence. Remember? I chose the gun, and Martha paid the price." Clara took his hand, feeling the weight of his guilt. "We all make choices trying to survive. Martha made hers, just like you made yours. Don't dishonor her memory by carrying guilt that isn't all yours to bear." Jesse squeezed her fingers, saying nothing, but some of the tension left his shoulders. The next morning, Clara woke to find Jesse teaching her a different kind of lesson. He'd set up a makeshift classroom with charcoal and flat pieces of bark. "What's this?" she asked. "Reading and writing lesson." At her look, he added, "I've seen you struggle with the wanted posters. If we're going to survive, you need to be able to read them yourself." Clara flushed. Her education had been limited to what was considered proper for a young lady. A bit of poetry, some Bible verses, enough arithmetic to manage household accounts. "I can read some. Some isn't enough out here." Jesse's voice was matter-of-fact, not judging. "So we'll fix that." They spent hours each day on lessons. Jesse was a patient teacher, and Clara was surprised to discover he was well-educated himself. "My mother was a schoolteacher," he explained when she commented on it. "Before she married my father, she made sure Martha and I could read, write, and cipher. Said education was the only thing that couldn't be taken away. She sounds wise." She was. Jesse's smile was sad. "Died when I was 14. Lung fever. After that, everything started falling apart. As Clara's reading improved, Jesse had her practice with his collection of wanted posters, teaching her to spot important details, distinguishing marks, known associates, last seen locations. "Why do you keep these?" she asked, studying a poster featuring Jesse himself. The sketch was a poor likeness, making him look far more vicious than the man teaching her letters. "Know your enemies, and sometimes," he pulled out one particular poster, "sometimes they're useful for other reasons." Clara read the name. Samuel Martinez, wanted for murder and robbery. The reward was substantial. "He's wanted too?" "Became an outlaw himself after our falling out. Seems betrayal's a hard habit to break." Jesse's smile was sharp. "I keep thinking our paths will cross again. When they do, I want to be ready. For revenge. For justice." Jesse took the poster back. "There's a difference, though sometimes it's hard to see." As Jesse grew stronger, restlessness set in. They'd been at the cabin for 2 weeks, longer than was safe. He spent hours staring out the window, hand never far from his gun. "We need to move," he said one morning. "They'll find this place eventually." "Where will we go?" "West, toward the coast, maybe. Easier to disappear in a city than out here." Clara thought of San Francisco, where Samuel Martinez supposedly lived respectable. "And if we run into your past, then we deal with it." Jesse's face was grim. "But first, we need supplies. There's a trading post about a day's ride north. Small place. Owner doesn't ask questions if the price is right." They set out the next morning, Clara wearing men's clothes and her hair tucked under a hat. Jessie had her practice deepening her voice, slouching her shoulders, walking with a masculine stride. "If anyone asks, you're my younger brother," he instructed. "Tom Colt. We're headed to the goldfields." The trading post was a ramshackle affair, more shack than store. The owner, a grizzled man missing most of his teeth, barely looked up when they entered. They were gathering supplies when Clara heard familiar voices outside. Her blood turned to ice as she recognized one of them, Marcus Kane. Jesse heard it too. His hand dropped to his gun, but Clara caught his wrist. "Too many," she whispered, having glimpsed at least 8 men through the dirty window. "We need another way." Jesse's eyes swept the store, calculating. Then he grabbed a bottle of whiskey from a shelf, splashing it liberally over his clothes. He mussed his hair, affected a stumbling gait. "Follow my lead," he muttered, then raised his voice in a drunken slur. "Tommy boy, stop counting them beans and come have a drink with your big brother." Clara caught on quickly, adopting a long-suffering expression as Jesse threw an arm around her shoulders, breathing whiskey fumes. The door burst open. Marcus Kane stood there, eyes sweeping the store before dismissing the apparently drunk cowboy and his embarrassed young companion. "You seen a man and woman come through?" Marcus demanded of the store owner. "He's tall, dark hair, probably armed. She might be dressed as a boy." The owner shrugged. "Lots of folks come through." Marcus slammed money on the counter. "Think harder." Jesse chose that moment to lurch forward, nearly colliding with Marcus. "Say there, friend, you buying drinks? My little brother here thinks he's too good to drink with me." Marcus shoved Jesse away in disgust. "Get away from me, you drunk fool." "No need to be unfriendly," Jesse slurred, then pretended to notice Marcus's guns. "Say, you boys look like you mean business." "Someone owe you money?" "We're looking for outlaws," one of Marcus's men said. "Jesse Colt and a woman." Jesse laughed, loud and sloppy. "Jesse Colt! Now there's a name to conjure with. Heard he's 7 feet tall and shoots lightning from his eyes." "He's just a man," Marcus said coldly. "And men die. That they do." Jesse agreed solemnly, swaying slightly. "That they surely do. Come on, Tommy, these gentlemen don't want to drink with us." They stumbled out of the store, Jesse maintaining his drunken act until they were well away. Only when they'd put miles between themselves and the trading post did he straighten in the saddle. That was close. Clara breathed. "Too close, and they're not giving up." Jesse's face was thoughtful. 8 men, well armed, well supplied. Marcus Kane's serious about finding you. About finding us. Clara corrected. I won't pretend this is just about me anymore. They made camp in a hidden canyon, both subdued by the near miss. As they sat by their small fire, Jesse pulled out a piece of paper and began writing. What are you doing? Writing a letter. He didn't look up. If something happens to me, I want someone to know the truth about you, about us. Clara moved to sit beside him, reading over his shoulder. The letter was addressed to Father Miguel in Sanctuary, Colorado. In it, Jesse told their story, not the romantic parts, but the facts. How Clara had fled a forced marriage, how she'd shown courage and grace under impossible circumstances, how she deserved better than a life running from her past. Why? Clara asked when he finished. Because someone should know you were more than just an outlaw's woman. Someone should know you had reasons for the choices you made. Clara took the letter, folded it carefully, and tucked it inside her shirt. Nothing's going to happen to you. Clara, she silenced him with a kiss, fierce and desperate. When they parted, she kept her hands on his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. We're going to survive this, she said. Both of us, together. I won't accept any other outcome. Jesse covered her hands with his own. My brave, stubborn Clara, what did I do to deserve you? You gave me freedom, she said simply. You showed me who I could be. And who's that? Clara smiled, sad and proud at once. Someone who doesn't need saving. Someone who can stand beside Jesse Colt as an equal, not a burden. You were never a burden, Jesse said softly. You were my redemption. They made love that night with a tenderness born of fear, knowing how fragile their happiness was, how easily it could be shattered. Every touch was a promise, every kiss a vow that whatever came next, they would face it together. As Clara lay in Jesse's arms afterward, listening to his heartbeat, she thought about the girl who'd run from the church in a white dress. That girl was gone now, replaced by someone harder, fiercer, more fully herself. She'd learned to shoot, to hunt, to kill when necessary. She'd learned to read danger in the shift of the wind, the flight of birds, the quality of silence. Most importantly, she'd learned that freedom wasn't just about running away. It was about choosing who to run with. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. Jesse's arms tightened around her. And I love you, Clara, more than I thought I could love anything in this broken world. Tomorrow they would run again. Tomorrow the hunt would continue. But tonight, they had each other. And that was enough. It had to be enough. The decision to return to Mercy's Bend came on a cold morning when frost silvered the grass and their breath clouded in the air. They'd been running for 3 months, and both were worn thin by constant vigilance. We can't keep this up forever, Clara said, watching Jesse struggle to saddle his horse with hands that shook from exhaustion. Running is killing us as surely as any bullet. Jesse paused, his back to her. What are you suggesting? You know what I'm suggesting. Clara moved to face him. We go back, face the law, try to build something real instead of always looking over our shoulders. Clara, they'll hang me. Maybe, or maybe they'll listen. Maybe there are people who'll speak for you. Tell the truth about who you really are. Jesse laughed, bitter and short. The truth is, I'm a thief and a killer. Nothing changes that. The truth is, you're a man who made bad choices trying to survive, who saved women from worse fates, who chose conscience over convenience. Clara took his face in her hands. The truth is, you're worth saving, Jesse Colt, whether you believe it or not. They argued for days, but Clara was relentless. She'd learned stubbornness from him. After all, finally, on a gray afternoon with storm clouds gathering, Jesse gave in. If we do this, he said, we do it my way. I turn myself in, alone. You stay hidden until we know which way the wind's blowing. No. Clara, we go together or not at all. Her chin lifted in that way he'd come to know meant no compromise. Partners, remember? Jesse pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. You'll be the death of me, woman, or your salvation. We'll see which. They rode toward Mercy's Bend as the first snows began to fall, transforming the desert into something alien and beautiful. Clara had never seen Jesse so tense, his hand never leaving his gun, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon. "There's something I need to tell you," he said as they camped their last night before reaching town. "About the stagecoach robbery, the one that started everything." Clara waited, sensing this was important. There were witnesses who ran when the shooting started. A family, man, woman, 2 kids. They saw everything, saw Samuel draw on me first, saw me try to protect that woman. Jesse stared into the fire. "I never knew their names, but I heard later they settled near Mercy's Bend. If they're still there, they could testify for you. Maybe, if they're willing, if anyone would believe them over Samuel's version." Clara thought about this as they prepared to enter the town that had been her prison. Witnesses who could change everything, if they could be found, if they would speak. They reached the outskirts of Mercy's Bend as the sun set, painting the snow-covered buildings in shades of rose and gold. The town looked smaller than Clara remembered, less imposing, or perhaps she was the one who'd changed. "Last chance to run," Jesse said. "No more running." Clara squared her shoulders. "Whatever happens, we face it." They rode down Main Street like specters from the past. People stopped and stared, recognition dawning on their faces. Clara heard her name whispered, saw the shock and scandal in their eyes. The sheriff's office sat where it always had, lamplight glowing through the windows. Clara could see her father's silhouette at his desk. Her heart clenched, but she didn't falter. Jesse dismounted first, helping her down with careful hands. "You sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything." They walked through the door together. Josiah Whitmore looked up from his papers, and the blood drained from his face. "Clara?" "Hello, Father." The sheriff's eyes moved to Jesse, and his hand dropped to his gun. "Jesse Colt, you got some brass showing your face here." "Sir." Jesse kept his hands visible, non-threatening. "I'm here to turn myself in, peacefully." "Jesse," Clara started, "and I'm here to testify." A new voice came from the cells. Edgar Kane emerged from the shadows, his face twisted with rage. "That man kidnapped my bride, destroyed my reputation, cost me thousands of dollars. I left of my own free will." Clara interrupted. "Jesse helped me, yes, but the choice was mine." "You were hysterical," Edgar sneered. "Not in your right mind. This outlaw took advantage." "Enough." Josiah's voice cut through the argument. He looked older, Clara realized, grayer. The past months had aged him. "Jesse Colt, you're under arrest. Clara, you're coming home." "No." Clara stepped closer to Jesse. "I'm staying with him." "The hell you are," Josiah exploded. "You've shamed this family enough." "Shame." Clara's own anger flared. "Was it shameful when you sold me to Edgar Kane like cattle? Was it shameful when you chose your reputation over your daughter's happiness?" "I was protecting you." "You were protecting yourself." Tears stung Clara's eyes, but she held them back. "Just like Mother protected you by never speaking of her bruises." The office went deadly quiet. Josiah's face turned gray. "Your mother's clumsiness." "Stop." Clara's voice was steel. "Stop lying. To me, to yourself. Mother's gone. But I won't pretend anymore. I won't be another woman who disappears into misery for the sake of appearances." Jesse remained silent through this exchange, but Clara felt his presence like a shield at her back. Her father seemed to shrink before her eyes. "Put him in a cell," Edgar demanded. "I want to see him hang." "On what charges?" Clara asked. "Murder, robbery, kidnapping? I've never murdered anyone in cold blood." Jesse said quietly, "Every man I've killed was trying to kill me first. As for kidnapping," he looked at Clara, "ask her if she was taken against her will." Clara met her father's eyes. "I begged him to take me away. I chose to stay with him. I chose everything that's happened since." The trial preparations began immediately. Word spread through Mercy's Bend like wildfire. The sheriff's daughter had returned with the outlaw who'd stolen her away. The scandal was delicious. the judgment swift and harsh. Clara refused to leave Jesse's side, spending her days in the jail, bringing him food, reading to him, simply being present. The townspeople whispered, but she held her head high. "You should distance yourself from me," Jesse said one evening. "Give yourself a chance at a normal life when this is over." "When this is over," Clara replied, "we'll leave together, either free or—" She couldn't finish. Jesse reached through the bars to touch her face. "No talk like that. You promised to live, remember? That was when I thought I'd be living without you. Now." She covered his hand with hers. "Now I know there's no life worth living that doesn't include you." The first break came from an unexpected source. Mabel arrived in town, fierce and uncompromising, ready to testify on Jesse's behalf. "That boy saved my life twice," she told anyone who'd listen. "Drove off rustlers who would have burned my ranch, never asked for nothing in return." Others came forward slowly. A Mexican family Jesse had warned about raiders. A traveling preacher he'd helped when bandits robbed the man's wagon. Each story painted a picture different from the wanted posters. But it was the Hutchinson family that changed everything. They came to the jail on a snowy evening, a week before the trial, parents in their 40s, 2 teenage children. Clara recognized the haunted look in Mrs. Hutchinson's eyes, the look of a woman who'd faced evil and survived. "You're Jesse Colt," Mr. Hutchinson said. It wasn't a question. "I am." "You saved my wife 5 years ago, the Garrison stage." Jesse went very still. "You were there." Saw the whole thing. Saw that snake Martinez try to hurt Mary. Saw you stop him. Saw him draw first when you fought." Mr. Hutchinson's voice was steady. "We ran when the shooting started. Should have stayed. Should have told the truth. But we had the children. You had to protect your family." Jesse said, "I don't blame you." Mrs. Hutchinson stepped forward. "We heard what happened after, how Martinez blamed you, how you became an outlaw because of that day." Tears ran down her face. "I'm so sorry. If we'd spoken up—" "You're speaking up now," Clara interrupted gently. "That's what matters." The Hutchinsons' testimony caused an uproar. Edgar Kane raged about bought witnesses and intimidation, but the family held firm. They'd kept newspaper clippings, had written dates and details in their family Bible. Their story had the ring of truth. The trial itself was a sensation. The courthouse overflowed with spectators, eager for drama. Jesse sat straight and calm, dressed in his best clothes. Clara beside him in defiance of all propriety. The prosecutor painted Jesse as a dangerous criminal who'd corrupted an innocent girl. The defense, a young lawyer who'd taken the case for the notoriety, presented him as a man driven to desperation by injustice. When Clara took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. "Tell us, Miss Whitmore," the prosecutor began, "how this outlaw forced you to accompany him." "He didn't force me. I asked for his help. While you were clearly distressed, not thinking clearly, I was thinking more clearly than ever before in my life." Clara's voice rang out strong. "I was about to be married to a man older than my father, a man who'd already buried 2 young wives. I was being sold to secure my family's social standing. Jesse Colt offered me freedom. I took it. And in the months since, has he held you against your will?" "The only thing Jesse Colt has ever held against my will is himself." Clara looked at Jesse then, letting her love show plainly. "He tried multiple times to send me to safety. I refused to go. Because he'd corrupted you. Because I love him." The words fell into the courtroom like stones into still water. "Because he showed me I was worth more than the price my father put on me. Because he treated me as an equal, taught me to survive, gave me the tools to save myself." The examination continued. But Clara never wavered. She spoke of their time together honestly, the hardships, the danger, but also the respect, the partnership, the love that had grown between them. When Jesse himself testified, he was equally frank. He admitted to his crimes, explained the circumstances without excusing them. He spoke of his sister Martha, of the choices that had led him down dark paths. "I'm not a good man," he said, "but I've tried to keep some honor in my dealings. I've never killed except in defense. I've never harmed a woman or child. And Clara Whitmore," his voice softened, "she made me remember there were still things worth fighting for besides survival." The jury deliberated for 2 days. Clara spent them in the jail with Jesse, reading to him, talking about everything and nothing, trying not to think about the gallows being tested in the courtyard. When the verdict came, the courtroom was packed to bursting. Clara held Jesse's hand as the foreman stood. "On the charge of murder in the first degree, we find the defendant not guilty." A murmur ran through the crowd. Clara's grip tightened. "On the charges of robbery and theft, we find the defendant guilty." Clara's heart sank, but the foreman wasn't finished. "However, given the circumstances presented, the evidence of provocation and self-defense, and the testimony regarding the defendant's character, we recommend mercy, exile rather than execution." The courtroom erupted. Edgar Kane shouted about corruption and injustice. Josiah Whitmore sat silent, looking every one of his years. The judge gavelled for order. "Jesse Colt, you are hereby sentenced to permanent exile from the United States territories. You have 30 days to settle your affairs and leave. If you return, the sentence will be death." Exile. Not ideal, but not the noose. Clara could have wept with relief. As they led Jesse back to his cell to await release, Clara faced her father one last time. "I'm going with him," she said. Josiah looked at her for a long moment. "I know. Is that all? No threats, no disowning?" "What would be the point?" His voice was tired. "I lost you the day I agreed to Kane's proposal, maybe before that." He reached into his desk, pulling out a small leather pouch. "Your mother's jewelry. She would have wanted you to have it." Clara took the pouch, surprised. "Father, go." Josiah turned away. "Take your outlaw and go. Try to find whatever happiness you can." It was as close to a blessing as she'd get. Clara left the sheriff's office for the last time, ready to face whatever came next. Jesse was released 3 days later. They left Mercy's Bend as snow began falling again, turning their backs on everything they'd known. "Any regrets?" Jesse asked as the town disappeared behind them. "None." Clara adjusted the gun at her hip, the ring on her finger, Mabel's gift. Finally used. "You? Only that I can't give you the life you deserve. You're giving me the only life I want." Clara smiled. "Besides, I hear Mexico's beautiful this time of year." Jesse laughed, the sound free and genuine. "Then Mexico it is. Mrs. Colt." They rode into the white wilderness. 2 outcasts bound by choice and circumstance and love. Behind them lay judgment and narrow minds. Ahead lay uncertainty and freedom. It was enough. They were together, and that was everything. The storm closed in behind them, erasing their tracks, as if they'd never been there at all. But somewhere in Mercy's Bend, stories would be told of the sheriff's daughter who chose love over law, freedom over safety. And perhaps, in the telling, other caged birds would find the courage to spread their wings. The journey south tested them in ways their flight from Mercy's Bend never had. Winter fought them at every turn, blizzards that turned the world white and featureless, ice that made every step treacherous, cold that crept into their bones and refused to leave. They sheltered where they could find refuge. Abandoned line shacks, caves, even a burned-out church where they spent Christmas Eve 1884. Clara melted snow for water while Jesse managed to snare a scrawny rabbit for their feast. "Not much of a Christmas dinner," he apologized, turning the rabbit on a makeshift spit. "It's perfect," Clara said, meaning it. She'd spent last Christmas at a lavish party, surrounded by plenty and feeling empty. Now, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the man she loved, she felt rich beyond measure. They reached the Rio Grande in late January, the river running low and sluggish between its banks. Across that muddy water lay Mexico, lay exile, lay a new life neither could quite envision. "Last chance," Jesse said, though his voice held no real conviction. They'd come too far to turn back now. "Stop saying that." Clara urged her horse into the water. "We crossed this river the day I took your hand in the storm." The Mexican side looked no different from the American. Same scrub brush, same endless sky. But Jesse's shoulders relaxed as they climbed the far bank, as if a weight he'd carried for years had finally lifted. They followed the river south for days before turning west into Chihuahua State. The desert here was different, older, more primal. Ancient mountains rose like broken teeth against the horizon. The silence was so complete it seemed like another presence traveling with them. In a small town whose name Clara couldn't pronounce, they traded Mabel's jewelry for supplies and a pack mule. The locals eyed them with curiosity, but not hostility. Gringos fleeing north were common enough to occasion little comment. "We need to find a place to settle," Jesse said as they camped beneath stars that seemed closer and brighter than any Clara had seen. "Can't drift forever." "Why not?" Clara asked, though she knew he was right. They were both tired, worn thin by months of running. "Because you deserve a home, a real life. I have a real life. With you." Jesse pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Stubborn woman. You wouldn't have me any other way." They found their place by accident. The valley was hidden in the Sierra Madre foothills, accessible only through a narrow canyon. A spring fed a small stream that had carved out a green oasis in the harsh landscape. The remains of an old adobe structure suggested someone had tried to ranch here before, though not recently. "It's perfect," Clara breathed, seeing not what was but what could be. Jesse was more practical, checking water flow, soil quality, defensive positions. Old habits died hard, but she saw the moment he too fell under the valley's spell, his weathered face softening. "It'll be hard work," he warned, "building a place from nothing. When has anything about us been easy?" Clara dismounted, kneeling to scoop up a handful of earth. It was rich, dark, full of promise. "This is it. Jesse, this is home." They worked through spring and into summer, harder than Clara had ever worked in her life. Jesse taught her to make adobe bricks, baking them in the fierce sun. Together they rebuilt walls, patched the roof, dug irrigation channels from the stream. Clara's hands grew even more calloused, her skin bronzed by the sun. She learned to cook over an open fire, to preserve meat, to coax vegetables from the desert soil. When Jesse was injured by a spooked horse, she set his dislocated shoulder herself, guided by his pained instructions. "You've become a proper frontier woman," Jesse said one evening, watching her mend his shirt with neat, efficient stitches. "I've become myself," Clara corrected. Finally. By autumn, they had a functioning ranch. Nothing grand, 3 rooms, a corral, a small garden. But it was theirs, built with their own hands. They acquired goats from a neighboring ranch, chickens from a traveling trader. Life took on rhythms Clara had never known, up with the sun, to bed with the stars. Every day shaped by the demands of survival. The nearest town was a day's ride, but they ventured there monthly for supplies. Clara's Spanish improved rapidly, aided by the local women who took pity on the young gringa trying to navigate the market. She learned to bargain, to joke, to fit in as much as any outsider could. Jesse was known simply as El Tejano, the Texan. If anyone suspected his true identity, they kept it to themselves. The past held no currency here. Only the present mattered. One market day, Clara noticed Jesse watching a group of children playing in the plaza, his expression wistful. "Do you want children?" she asked that night, the question hanging between them like a challenge. Jesse was quiet for a long time. "I never thought I'd live long enough to be a father. Never thought I'd have anything to offer a child except a bad name and worse example." "That's not an answer." He turned to look at her. "Do you?" "I didn't. When I was trapped in Mercy's Bend, the thought of bringing a child into that life terrified me. But now," she gestured at their simple home, their hard-won peace. "Now I think maybe, someday." Jesse pulled her into his arms. "Someday," he agreed. And for the first time, it seemed possible they might have one. Winter came gently to their valley. The stream never froze. The winds were blocked by the canyon walls. They spent the short days improving their home, Jessie built furniture while Clara sewed curtains and rugs from traded fabric. "We should have a Christmas tree," Clara announced in December. "Not many pines in the desert," Jessie pointed out. "Then we'll make do." She dragged in a scraggly juniper, decorating it with bits of tin and colorful thread. It looked nothing like the grand trees of her childhood, but Jessie's smile when he saw it was worth more than all the ornaments money could buy. They were tending the goats on a clear February morning when riders appeared at the canyon mouth. Jessie had his gun drawn before Clara even registered the threat, pushing her behind him. But the riders came slowly, hands visible and empty. 3 men, Mexican, wearing the weathered look of vaqueros. "Señor Tejano?" the lead rider called. "We mean no harm. We come to talk." Jessie didn't lower his weapon. "Talk about what?" "About the men who search for you, gringos. They ask questions in the towns, show pictures. They offer much gold for information." Clara's heart sank. They'd been found. After everything, they'd been found. "What did you tell them?" Jessie asked. The vaquero smiled. "Nothing. We tell them nothing, but they do not give up easy. These men, they say one is a sheriff's daughter, stolen away. They say the other is a dangerous bandito." "Clara wasn't stolen," Jessie said firmly. "She came of her own will. See, this we think must be true. A stolen woman does not look at a man the way the señora looks at you." The vaquero's expression grew serious. "But these hunters, they will find you eventually. Unless you are under protection. Don Alejandro Morales. He owns much land here. His reach is long. His word is law. He would welcome skilled people to work his rancho. People who know horses, who work hard, who cause no trouble." Jessie and Clara exchanged glances. They'd built this place, made it home. The thought of leaving, starting over again. "Think on it," the vaquero said. "Don Alejandro is a fair man, and his protection—" He shrugged eloquently. "Even gringos with gold learn not to trouble those under his wing." After they left, Clara and Jessie sat in silence, watching the sun set over their valley. "We could stay and fight," Jessie said eventually. "How many times? How many men would you have to kill to keep me safe?" Clara shook her head. "That's not the life either of us wants. So we run again. No, we adapt. We survive. We find another way to be free." The next week, they rode to meet Don Alejandro. He was an older man, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, who listened to their story, the version Jessie told, anyway, with polite attention. "You are not the first to seek sanctuary in Mexico," he said when Jessie finished. "Nor will you be the last. I judge men by their actions, not their past. Can you train horses?" "Yes, sir." "Can you defend what is mine?" "If necessary. And the señora, forgive me, but a rancho is no place for delicate women." Clara stepped forward. "I can ride, shoot, work cattle, tend wounds, and make adobe bricks. I'm many things. Don Alejandro, but delicate isn't one of them." The old man smiled. "I believe you. Very well. You will have a house on my land. Wages fair for your work. In return, you give me loyalty and honest labor. Agreed?" They shook on it. And like that, their lives changed again. The Morales Rancho was vast, a small kingdom carved from the desert. Jessie threw himself into the work, training horses with a skill that quickly earned respect. Clara found her place too, helping the rancho women with cooking for the vaqueros, tending the vegetable gardens, teaching some of the children basic English in exchange for Spanish lessons. "You seem happy," Jessie observed one evening as they sat outside their small house, not as private as their valley, but comfortable enough. "I am happy," Clara realized with some surprise. "Aren't you?" Jessie seemed to search for words. "I'm not looking over my shoulder every moment. I'm doing honest work for honest pay. I wake up beside you each morning. Yes, I'm happy. Happier than I probably deserve." "Stop that," Clara said firmly. "No more talk of deserving. We've earned this. Jessie, both of us." News filtered down from the north occasionally. Edgar Kane had put out new rewards. Hired Pinkerton detectives. Clara's father had retired as sheriff, his health broken. The Hutchinson family had left Mercy's Bend after harassment from Kane's men. "We caused so much trouble for others," Clara said after hearing about the Hutchinsons. "They made their choice, same as us." Jesse replied, "Can't carry the whole world's guilt. Clara, got enough of our own to manage." Spring came again, and with it, unexpected joy. Clara had been feeling poorly for weeks, attributed it to the change in weather, but when the rancho's midwife examined her, the diagnosis was different. "You're with child. Senora, perhaps 3 months along." Clara sat stunned as the woman bustled out, a baby. Jesse's baby. After all they'd been through, new life taking root. She found Jesse in the corral, working with a particularly stubborn stallion. He took one look at her face and vaulted the fence. "What's wrong? Are you hurt?" "No, Jesse, I'm pregnant." The words hung between them. Jesse's face went through a series of expressions: shock, fear, wonder, and finally, pure joy. "A baby." His voice was hoarse. "A baby." He caught her up in his arms, spinning her around before suddenly setting her down gently, as if she might break. "Is it safe? Should you be—" "I'm fine," Clara laughed. "Women have been doing this forever. Not my woman, not with my child." His hand went to her still flat stomach. Reverent. "God, Clara, a baby. Are you happy?" "Happy." Jesse knelt before her, pressing his lips to her belly. "I'm terrified, overjoyed, grateful. I never thought, never dreamed." "I know." Clara ran her fingers through his hair. "But here we are. Here we are." He agreed, rising to kiss her deeply. "My brave Clara, my heart, mother of my child." The pregnancy progressed without complication. Jesse became almost comically protective, trying to prevent Clara from doing any work until she threatened to shoot him if he didn't stop treating her like spun glass. Don Alejandro, pleased by the news, gave them a larger house closer to the main buildings. "Children need room to grow," he said with grandfatherly satisfaction. As Clara's belly swelled with new life, she often thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a forced wedding to a chosen marriage, from a cage of expectations to the freedom of exile, from fear to love. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Jesse one night as they lay together, his hand protective over her stomach. "Everything we gave up?" "I gave up nothing that mattered," Jesse said firmly, "and gained everything that did. What about you? You lost more than I did. Family, respectability, the life you were raised for." "I was raised to be ornamental and obedient," Clara said. "To pour tea and produce airs and never speak my mind. That girl died in the church that night. I don't mourn her." "And who are you now?" Clara considered. "I'm Clara Colt, exile, mother-to-be, crackshot, adobe brickmaker, woman who tamed the notorious Jesse Colt." "Tamed," Jesse laughed. "That what you call it?" "Gentled. Then showed him he was worth loving. And he showed her she was worth everything." Jesse murmured against her skin. "Every risk, every bullet dodged, every mile run. Worth it all." Their daughter was born as autumn touched the mountains, squalling and perfect and fierce from her first breath. They named her Hope for what she represented, not just survival, but the possibility of something more. "She's beautiful," Jesse whispered, cradling his daughter like she might evaporate. "God, Clara, she's so beautiful." "She's ours," Clara said simply, and that said everything. As she watched Jesse pace the floor that night, singing softly to quiet Hope's cries, Clara felt the last of her old life slip away like a shed skin. Sheriff Whitmore's dutiful daughter was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who'd chosen her own path, forged her own freedom, created her own family. The price had been high: exile, danger, the loss of everything familiar, but the reward. Jesse caught her watching and smiled, that rare, unguarded expression that transformed his weathered features. Hope had quieted, one tiny fist wrapped around his finger. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "None," Clara replied. "Not one." Outside, coyotes called to the rising moon. The desert stretched endless and unforgiving. Somewhere to the north, their old lives continued without them. But here, in this borrowed house on foreign soil, they'd built something real, something theirs, something worth any price. They were no longer running. They were home. 5 years passed like seasons in their valley, sometimes harsh, often beautiful, always theirs. The small ranch near the border had become a true home, with chickens scratching in the yard and Hope's laughter echoing off adobe walls. Clara stood at the window, watching Jessie teaching their daughter to ride. Hope, 5 years old with her mother's determination and her father's fearlessness, sat straight-backed on a gentle mare while Jessie walked alongside, his hand never far from the reins. "That's it, little one," his voice carried on the morning air. "Feel the horse's rhythm. Move with her, not against her." They'd built something good here. The other ranchers called them the quiet gringos. Respectful but private. Hard-working but mysterious. Their past remained buried, though sometimes Clara caught Jessie staring north with haunted eyes. The school Clara had started now served 12 children from neighboring ranches. She taught them English and arithmetic, while learning their stories, their dreams. It filled a need she hadn't known existed, to build something lasting, to leave more than footprints in the desert sand. "Mama, look," Hope called out. "I'm riding by myself." "I see you, my brave girl," Clara called back, her heart swelling with the fierce love that still surprised her with its intensity. That evening, as they sat on the porch after Hope had been tucked into bed, a rider appeared on the horizon. Jesse's hand went automatically to his gun. Old habits died hard, but relaxed when he recognized one of Don Alejandro's vaqueros. "Visitors coming," the man reported. "Gringos." They asked for the Tejano and his woman in town. Clara's blood chilled. After 5 years, had they finally been found? "How many?" Jesse asked, his voice steady. "Just one, senor, an old man. He seems tired, not like the hunters who came before." They spent a sleepless night, Jesse cleaning weapons while Clara packed essentials in case they needed to run. But when morning brought the visitor, Clara's knees nearly buckled. "Father?" Josiah Whitmore had aged 20 years and 5. His hair was white as desert bones, his once proud shoulders bent. He sat his horse like a man who'd ridden too far for too long. "Clara," his voice was rough with emotion. May I get down?" She found herself nodding, unable to speak. Jessie stood behind her, tense as wire, ready for trouble. "I'm not here to cause problems," Josiah said, dismounting slowly. "I'm here to—" He removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "I'm here to see my daughter, and to meet my granddaughter." "How did you find us?" Jessie asked. "Wasn't hard, not when you know where to look. You left quite a trail, helping folks along the way. The Hutchinsons especially. They spoke highly of you both." "The Hutchinsons? But they left because of me." Josiah's voice was heavy with regret. "I helped them resettle in California, away from Kane's reach. They told me everything. About that day with Martinez, about who you really are." "Colt." Jessie said nothing, but Clara felt some of the tension leave his body. "Why now?" Clara asked. "After all these years?" "Because I'm dying." Josiah said it simply, without self-pity. "Doc says I've got maybe 6 months. Bad heart, and I couldn't go without trying to make things right." Clara studied her father, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time, not the towering authority figure of her youth, but a flawed man wrestling with his choices. "Edgar Kane?" she asked. "Dead 2 years ago. His boy Marcus took a bullet trying to rob a bank. Without them pushing, most folks were happy to let the matter drop." Josiah met Jessie's eyes. "There's talk of amnesty for old crimes. Times are changing. Maybe you could come home someday." "This is home," Clara said firmly. "I know." Josiah's smile was sad. "I can see that. You've built something good here." Hope chose that moment to burst onto the porch, drawn by voices. She stopped short at the sight of a stranger, pressing against Clara's skirts. "Hope, this is—" Clara hesitated, then made her choice. "This is your grandfather." Josiah's face crumpled. "She's beautiful. Looks like her mother. She has her father's spirit," Clara said, feeling Jesse's hand on her shoulder. "May I?" Josiah gestured toward Hope. Clara nodded. "Hope, would you show grandfather your drawings?" The little girl, curious despite her shyness, led Josiah inside. Clara and Jesse followed, watching as their daughter chattered about her pictures, her pony, the lizard she'd caught yesterday. "You did good, Clara," Josiah said softly. "Better than I ever did." They spent 3 days together, awkward at first, then easier as old wounds began to scab over. Josiah told stories of Clara's mother, things Clara had never known. Jesse, wary at first, gradually relaxed enough to share a drink with his former hunter. "I was wrong," Josiah said on his last night. "About you, about everything. I thought respectability mattered more than happiness. Thought control meant love." He looked at Clara. "Your mother tried to tell me, but I was too proud to listen. We all make mistakes," Clara said, surprised to find she meant it. "Some bigger than others." Josiah pulled out a leather folder. "I brought these. Thought you should have them." Inside were documents. Clara's birth certificate, her mother's wedding ring, and, surprisingly, a legal statement clearing Jesse of all charges in the Martinez case, signed by a federal judge. "How?" Jesse stared at the paper. The Hutchinsons' testimony carried weight, and Martinez himself got caught last year, confessed to a whole string of crimes, including perjury about that day. Josiah shrugged. "Like I said, times are changing. This means—" Clara couldn't finish. "It means you're free," Josiah said. "Both of you, to stay here, to come back, to go wherever you want without looking over your shoulders." That night, after Josiah had retired, Clara and Jesse sat by their fire, staring at the papers that changed everything. "We could go back," Clara said carefully. "See Mabel, visit my mother's grave, show Hope where we came from." "Is that what you want?" Clara considered. "I don't know. This is our home, our life, but to have the choice—" "To have the choice is everything," Jesse agreed. When Josiah left the next morning, Clara embraced him, the first time she'd hugged her father since childhood. "Thank you," she whispered. "Take care of yourself. Clara, take care of your family." He mounted with difficulty, then looked back. "Your mother would be proud. I'm proud, though I know that doesn't mean much now." "It means something," Clara said, and found it was true. They watched him ride away, a small figure against the vast landscape. "You all right?" Jesse asked. "Yes, I think I am." Clara leaned into his strength. "It's strange. I spent so long hating him, but now I just feel sorry for him. He's trying to make amends. That counts for something." Hope ran out, already forgetting the grandfather she'd just met, eager to show them a new trick with her rope. Life moved on, as it always did. 6 months later, a letter arrived. Josiah had died peacefully, leaving everything to Clara, the house, his savings, even his sheriff's star. She held the star, remembering how it had gleamed on his chest, symbol of everything she'd run from. "What do you want to do?" Jesse asked. "I want to go back. Not to stay, just to say goodbye properly, to show Hope where her story began." Jesse nodded. "Then we'll go." The journey north was different from their flight south. They traveled openly, with papers proving their legitimacy. Hope chattered excitedly about seeing snow, meeting new people, riding in a real stagecoach. Mercy's Bend had changed. New buildings lined the streets. Automobiles puttered alongside horses. The church where Clara had fled her wedding still stood, but smaller somehow, less imposing. They visited the cemetery first. Clara knelt by her mother's grave, introducing Hope, leaving wildflowers. At her father's fresh grave, she left the sheriff's star. "He wasn't a bad man," she told Jesse. Just a lost one. Mabel, grayer but still fierce, nearly wept when they appeared at her ranch. "Knew you'd make it," she said, embracing them both. "Knew you had the grit." They stayed a week, letting Hope play with Mabel's dogs, showing her the warehouse where her parents had first taken shelter. The town's reaction was mixed. Some welcomed them, others turned away. But Clara found she didn't care about their judgment anymore. "It's smaller than I remembered," she told Jesse as they walked Main Street. "You're bigger." He replied, "Bigger than this place could ever hold." They sold her father's house, donated the money to start a proper school. Let the town talk about that instead of old scandals. On their last night, they camped at the spot where they'd first met. The storm-scarred boulder still stood, the canyon unchanged despite the years. "Do you remember?" Jesse asked. "That half-drowned girl in a wedding dress?" "I remember a dangerous outlaw who saved my life." We saved each other. Hope played in the sand nearby, building castles, unaware of the significance of this place. Clara watched her daughter. So free, so unafraid. Everything Clara had wanted to be. "No regrets?" Jesse asked. Their old question. "None." Clara replied, "Not one." They returned to Mexico, to their ranch, to their real life. The school Clara had started grew, adding a second teacher. Jesse's reputation with horses spread, bringing work from distant ranches. Hope grew strong and wild and free, speaking 2 languages, afraid of nothing. Sometimes bounty hunters still came, following old trails. But now Clara met them calmly, showing Jesse's pardon papers, offering water for their journey elsewhere. The legend of Jesse Colt faded into the past, replaced by the reality of a man who trained horses and loved his family. Years flowed like water. Hope grew tall. Other children followed. A son named after Jesse's father. Another daughter with her grandmother's eyes. The ranch expanded. The walls grew thicker. The roots deeper. Clara opened a proper school, teaching reading and writing to anyone who wanted to learn. Jesse, his body bearing the scars of his wild years, but his spirit finally at peace, became a grandfather before his hair fully grayed. One evening, as they sat watching their grandchildren play where Hope had once played, Jesse took Clara's hand. "Was it worth it?" he asked. "All of it." Clara looked at their life, the home built with their own hands, the children raised in freedom, the love that had survived everything the world threw at it. "Every moment," she said, "every choice, every mile we ran brought us here. To this, to this." Clara squeezed his weathered hand. "To everything." The sun set over their valley, painting the adobe walls gold. Somewhere in the distance, coyotes called to each other. But here, in this place they'd claimed and made their own, there was only peace. They'd started as fugitives, a runaway bride and a wanted man, desperate and wild. They'd become something else entirely, proof that love could triumph over law, that freedom was worth any price, that 2 broken people could build something whole. The desert kept their secrets. The mountains stood witness to their joy, and in a small valley hidden from the world's judgment, they lived and loved and prospered, having chosen each other above all else. Some would call it sin. Others would call it fate. Clara and Jesse called it home, and that, in the end, was all that mattered. Thank you, dear listeners, for joining me on this Wild West journey of love, freedom, and redemption. I hope Clara and Jesse's story touched your heart as much as it touched mine. Where are you listening to this tale? Please share in the comments below. I'd love to know if you're by a cozy fireplace, on your commute, or perhaps even somewhere in the vast American West where our story took place. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel for more authentic frontier stories. And share your thoughts about Clara and Jesse's journey. Did you believe in their love? What would you have done in Clara's shoes? Your comments and stories make our community special. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own sunset.